Welcome to Open Source Health. I'm Trip Johnson, founder and social entrepreneur who spent the last decade trying to make healthcare a little more humane and accessible and a lot less soul-crushing. This show is about the real work of changing a broken system, from policy and strategy to using technology and AI in ways that actually help people. Whether it's intake forms, care teams, or back-end systems, we're digging into how healthcare can be built for real-world impact. Glad you're here. It starts with a quick check, and then suddenly 45 minutes are gone. Apps like TikTok, Robinhood, and Instagram, these endless news feeds, they're designed to hijack your brain. Behavioral addictions aren't just bad habits. They're one of the biggest health issues of our time. Listen to this episode of Open Source Health to learn more. All right. Well, welcome back to the next episode of the Open Source Health. We are trying to record in person and struggling mightily with tech issues.
We're not tech guys.
Oh, man. I don't think I could end up with a tech addiction after this fumbling around.
You definitely could. You're wired for it, just not from this. Just not audio tech addiction.
Well, we talked about like men's therapy last week, and then we saw the Scott Galloway, his Saturday podcast was about pornography.
Yeah.
And it got me thinking. I actually asked, Dr. O'Connor and Dan and Liz were talking about cases together, and I was asking if they were seeing much gambling and pornography.
Mm-hmm.
People coming in complaining of that. And we have a little bit on the pornography, but not on the gambling.
That's surprising to me.
Yeah.
I was just at a conference and got asked a lot about gambling. We actually just had someone pop up today that wanted to know if we could help them with gambling, which I find is like, it's a weird one, right? Because like there's not a lot of great treatment options or anything for it. You've had a couple of interesting personal, I guess, like friends or friends that have struggled with it in a way that I think is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I think I guess where I'd want to jump in is just it's not recognizing the DSM, right? Like you can't like actually get gambling treatment covered by insurance.
Right.
If you're complaining of it as gambling, if you're using it as anxiety, depression, like you could probably kind of sneak in gambling treatment because that's the cause of your anxiety or depression.
Yeah.
But like we don't recognize any sort of gambling disorder, do we, right now?
I don't think so, but it's the same thing with like sex addiction. Sex addiction's not really recognized. And I think that one makes a little more sense to me, right? Because sex addiction can be this really difficult to define, sort of amorphous, but it's probably like rarer than some people would like to acknowledge. But then it's also probably one of those that when you see it, it's like, man, what else we're going to call that thing?
Yeah.
And I think gambling, though, is one of those that seems like there's got to be a way clearer line for that, right? Because like with sex, you got to have it, right? Like it's a procreative process. Even if it's like pornography and masturbation, like there's some very clear primal biological drive for it. Whereas like gambling addiction is more of a tertiary reinforcement, right?
I mean, I get the argument. I guess I just find both so hard to actually understand personally that I have like a hard time thinking that like I don't understand either. But I can understand even like I feel like I can understand an eating disorder,
right?
Or even like just a general tech addiction.
Yeah.
To Facebook, Instagram, TikTok more than I can either gambling or like the true sex addiction piece.
What I'm curious about though from you, and I want to be careful because I don't want to run the risk of doing that thing where you take like normative behavior and then you pathologize it.
Right.
But I'm curious if you were to take gambling addiction and think of it through a strict behavioralist lens and think of it strictly as intermittent reinforcement.
Right.
I think I have a hard time seeing how starting a company and all the like ups and downs you've had and we've had going through this, like there's an element of that is like maybe at a very basic biological if you look at it just in terms of pure reinforcement, this intermittent reinforcement, that it has some quality of that. I mean, granted, you can not like model things out and do like it's not as much of a game of chance, but I wonder if there's like you don't that doesn't help you like tap into that, understand that at all.
Well, I mean, maybe I just don't understand I don't understand thinking that you're going to win in gambling.
Right.
Because like, it's literally the house is built to beat you. So I don't want to play a game I'm designed to lose without cheating.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I totally get like being aggressive, being risky, and having some impulse control issues. I just can't see how I would want to gamble without that.
It's wild too because I have nothing about it.
Yeah. But so we agree on that, but at the same time, like I'm also like when I look at the macroeconomic landscape, I'm very concerned about gambling and tech addiction.
It's terrifying
because like I think it's going to be super pervasive.
Yeah,
and I think this gambling stuff. I mean, we talked about it some last week, but people who are now you can do options trading from your phone, from your Robinhood account. Like people are really screwing up their lives.
The crypto stuff.
Yeah, crypto is all just gambling.
There's no. I mean, I don't have an in-depth understanding of crypto, but it's largely you're just playing a game. It's like the you remember Price is Right?
Yeah,
you have the little guy going up to the top. You have to yodeling and all that sort of stuff, and you just have to pull the trigger before he goes over the edge, and you're looking to get as close as you can.
Yeah.
It's just basically what crypto looks like. They're like meme coin stuff.
But like so you were just at a conference and a lot of people were talking about it?
I mean, there was a lot of requests that we could do or address anything that's primary gambling.
Yeah.
And this goes back to you've made a point before, and like we've talked about this, where the thing that's terrifying about gambling is like you don't know it's a problem until you're gone.
You've wrecked your life.
Until you've destroyed your life. Yeah. With like everything else, you don't see a lot of them, but they're old heroin addicts, right?
Yeah.
You can do that forever. Your threshold for life may be a lot lower. Your quality of life may be a lot lower. But there's ways that people hide their substance use for years, right? And but you eventually start to see it.
Yeah.
Right? Like you start to see this stuff come out, and some interventions and things can happen. But gambling, man, you're like in it. And then and then by the time you're really in it, it becomes clear that it's a problem. You're so far gone. Life's ruined.
Yeah. So like if I'm trying to think through this in terms of like I would venture to say these technology and gambling and maybe that all falls to me that actually all falls under technology. Like we're not gambling.
Yeah.
Like one of the things we've done from like that behavioral perspective is we've reduced the friction to gamble.
Bingo, yeah.
We've reduced the friction to engage in sexual acts with our phones. Or computers, but like we have these devices where we can just go to the dopamine casino anytime we want. And if I could do anything right now, positioning, looking at the future, it would be develop resources for gambling and technology addictions because basically everyone's probably going to struggle with this at some level. Or lots of people. Yeah.
I'll go to my hotel room tonight. I'll sit down on TikTok and will probably fall asleep way too late, right, or something. But the frictionless piece is what's interesting, right? So I'm going to take it back to the question I asked earlier, right? Like I asked if you could see parallels with the way that you engaged in a business, right?
Yeah.
And so there's gambling, there's risk, granted, there's modeling and all this stuff, but that was a very friction-full process, right? And so it requires a lot of planning, a lot of strategy, a lot of engagement, but the reward is much bigger. But if you could approximate some of the payoff of that with much less friction, but still taking on all the same risk, that's sort of maybe that is the parallel with gambling. And I think about the same thing with like sex and pornography, right? Going out to a bar, sitting down, looking, searching, and acquiring sex, your success rate on that's going to be much, much lower, right? Like trying to have sex at a bar or whatever, pick someone up is much, much lower versus pornography. right? Like you can pull up porn and like I'm a sex positive guy. Whatever your thing is, like I don't want to do this like weird, like I'm talking in terms of pure utility, right?
Yeah, you can fuck a chicken if you want.
Right. Yeah. Bok, baby. Yeah.
It doesn't bother me. It doesn't hurt anyone.
Yeah.
Assuming it's a dead chicken.
Yeah, well, a chicken might like it. Who knows? But what becomes interesting about that is now we're actually talking about like a survival level piece, and I think Galloway is just someone that speaks to this stuff so well. And but men at a just pure evolutionary perspective, men that aren't partnered, um, tend to fare worse in so many different ways. Women fare worse in so many ways. Society feels worse in so many ways. I think one of the real downfalls of some of the climate change narratives and stuff like that is we've been pushing this hard thing of population control and like scarcity mindset and that sort of stuff. And I don't know how you would trace if that actually is affecting birth rates, but we're at a pretty quickly hitting an inflection point around birth rates. And there's probably a million, infinite number of reasons for that are coalescing in a mosaic effect. But if population dips below a certain level, it becomes unredoing. And then you have an aging population that can't be supported by a much smaller proportion of younger population.
You mean like our current social security system?
Bingo, exactly, just like that.
And that, I mean, I guess I'm not as interested in like the replacement rate stuff. And sometimes I think these are just macroeconomic things that economists throw around. But what I think what actually struck me as really interesting, as we've talked about Ozempic in the past, is everything we're talking about now from the addiction piece outside of like substance use addiction are all things that there used to be a lot of friction to get, and there's a biological imperative to receive them.
Right.
So as we've removed the friction, now that there's abundant food, and a lot of it is triggered to or designed to make us crave it and not be satiated. Now we have an obesity epidemic.
Right.
We had, it was hard to find a mate, and you had to go out there in the real world. And now all of a sudden, then it went to Tinder and Bumble and your dating apps, and you had that bifurcation where 80% of women are going after 10% of men.
Yeah.
And so there's.
But I mean, so the thing is, I do think maybe that's not exactly the topic that we're focusing on, the niche topic in this that we're focusing on right now. But I do find the population piece really disturbing, especially if it is something where people aren't going out and securing sexual partners, and because the drive to do so isn't getting so intense that you would actually leave the comfort of your, this hedonic cocoon that we call our couch. And so you don't end up going out, you don't meet people, and there's no, all that sort of, it could have all these like secondary and then third order sort of effects. And I don't know how you connect that stuff. Maybe it's there and maybe it's not. But regardless, like there's a lot of things that get lost in that, right? Like all the skills you have to develop to acquire sex, to do that sort of stuff, or acquire a romantic partner or a relationship. There's a lot that has growth and potential and things that have to happen for that to come together, right?
Well, I think like this, and I'm with you on all of that. I'm just not. I feel like countries that have aging populations do have economic troubles, but I've never seen the goal of anything for national economic gain. Like GDP, Japan's GDP is down.
Right.
Like, does it, like, they have less people, sure, their GDP is down. Like, maybe it's up based on the number of work. Like, so when I hear it, or when I hear, like, Elon Musk, like, having 97 kids, and, talking about how, like, we need to have more kids, but we're also in an economy now where I saw like the new Birkin bag is a third kid.
Yeah.
And it's like you have to be like, it is now a status symbol.
Yeah.
In some communities, like to be able to afford 3 kids.
Yeah.
And I thought that was funny. But yeah, I guess I'm fascinated. Like I would like to be ready for gambling. Like I feel like very confident if we could do gambling technology, pornography, write that all up, and have treatment around that. I mean, there's just a huge need for it.
Yeah.
And I wonder what we can do to clear the way to do that. And
Yeah.
because it's just not recognized, right? Like again, like we've done this before, not even it's becoming more common, but it's been years where we go, well, can you take a primary process addiction?
Yeah.
And I guess I just wonder like the difference between substance use addiction, not even like neurologically,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
is it, like same treatment protocols you think? Like what do you think would be different?
I don't know, man. But I just had this memory pop up where I was thinking of a parallel sort of thing, right? Like uh, when I first started my clinical career, someone had asked me if like cannabis addiction was a thing. I was like, yeah, for pussy.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. But by the time I was like getting less out of direct clinical work, it's like, yeah, I'm seeing exactly what I would call like addiction. And it has all the same sort of
100%.
catastrophic fallout, like all this calamity of stuff coming together. In years past, when someone asked me like, "What about sex addiction?" It's just I most of the time I didn't see something that like made me think that this was this like rate like it was always comorbid with something.
Yeah.
Right? Like someone's doing too much, like too much blow and too like drinking too much, whatever. It's just like sex, right?
Yeah.
They have a hypersexual person, but it's like I don't know if this is a disorder or what. But like we're sort of seeing like again, it's the concentration of it. I think the frictionless access to it is actually to creating a lot of something, right? Like
something's going on.
Something's going on.
And I think it's going to be, I would just implore anyone in some sort of regulating body. Like we probably just need to get these things added to the DSM as the first step. Like I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But we've got to like recognize that because the technology piece is really terrifying to me.
Yeah.
Because like I can't imagine with my current impulse control, like you said, like I have to and where I feel like it's interesting for me is like I have to like leave my phone other places if I don't want to use it. Sometimes,
right. Yeah.
Right. Like if I'm at home with the kids, like my wife's much better about it than I am. But I've got to like put my phone away where I'm just gonna be like, I'd like to check this. I'd like to check that. And like thankfully, like I grew up at a time where that wasn't the norm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But now, like if you've got a smartphone, like you've got everything right there. And at least like remembering a time before is helpful.
So I think about this, right? Like what you're describing is you've ultimately found something more purposeful, being adapted.
Sure.
So you now have these obligations that are pulling at it. And so I think it's something similar with like substance use recovery is that you ultimately have to find something that's a hedonic competitor for it. The problem is it's always going to be tough to find something that's a hedonic competitor that has as much primacy to it, right?
Yeah.
Like if you can just pull your phone up and look at any number of like any number of like porn, sexual stuff, like whatever, right? Like this just is so easy to do, but it's never going to be as gratifying as being in a long-term relationship or creating stability or going out and any of that sort of stuff, having a sexual relationship with someone, right? And so that's more satisfying. And if you get into that, it starts to compete with that in some sort of way, at least to mitigate against it, right? Like you're obviously not done with tech.
Yeah. No, I mean absolutely, but I guess like where I'm interested in is like we've got this meme of the 20-year-old guy in his parents' basement playing video games, jerking off,
right,
vaping, like, and maybe placing some little bets.
Yeah.
But that meme is like real.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so,
right.
like, because we are, and we're, to me, it's this pseudo flow thing that I'm very concerned with. That we're approximating the real thing better and better. And that's we have a cheaper, frictionless alternative to the real thing.
Yes.
And the cheaper, frictionless alternative doesn't come with any of the other positive externalities.
Bingo.
Like you said, like if you have to go to the bar and try and pick up a chick or a dude or a person, then you can develop social skills. Like you are in community. There's a lot of other stuff
Right.
happening.
At the worst, you're having a fun night. Right?
Yeah, I mean, like in theory.
Yeah, maybe too much.
Yeah, I mean that fun night can be a problem too. But,
Yeah.
but like there were positive externalities, right? And then even when we talk about it, like I think even the substance use piece, like the scarier part of substance use disorders now are the isolation that come with it, right?
Right.
Like the thing you don't want to do for an IV user is use alone.
Yeah.
Right? Like use with people. If you're fading, like we can bring you back.
Yeah. Narcan.
And same thing like with, and I think that's like the piece with the weed that is different now, right? Like it's just like you just have to like go out and like buy some crappy weed and like either figure out how to roll it or smoke it out of an apple or something. Pick out the seeds and stems, and like now you're just getting like I'm just gonna go to the store and get 98% THC, and I'm just gonna rip this and be in my little on the couch and. But now I got DoorDash. It's terrible. Yeah. So yeah, I mean that frictionless nature of it, and again, the problem is that like all of this, it's the combination to me of like biology and capitalism to some extent, and we can't like societally, what are you gonna do? Because it is easier. Like these trade-offs kind of make sense.
Right. You know what I was thinking about just now was the Donald Hoffman he's a scientist. He did some research on consciousness, and one of the things he talked about is humans we've not actually evolved for detecting reality. We've evolved to like recognize patterns. Yeah. Just because there's a million different reasons for that, and that would take us down a rabbit hole. Yeah. But the problem with that is it largely works for us as a species, right? Like on the aggregate, if we're selecting for patterns, more often than not, like we're gonna get it right enough that it serves us as survival. Yeah. But the problem is there's times when those pattern recognitions are poor approximations that align with survival. Yeah. And I was thinking about he uses one of the biological examples he uses of this was there was some sort of beetle or something in Australia, and there was this they had to ban like brown bottles, and the reason they had to ban them was because the beetle would mistake it for its partner and just start breeding with it until it died. And so like the species of these beetles was dying off, and they were sort of important for the ecosystem. And so something like we're still just animals, right? Yeah. And so the problem is we're just breeding with our phones or whatever, and it's a poor approximation of what we actually need. And the correlation's probably similar with back to your obesity epidemic, right? Now we have this access to food that, at the risk of sounding, a little like I've got an RFK brainworm, like there's a reason that it's probably better to eat whole foods and yada, 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 and less processed foods. But the reason's not because you're, whatever, it's whatever RFK would say. But the reason to do it is because those things tend to have be packaged in a way that's we're going to be attracted to because all of our pattern recognition faculties are pulled towards that. Yeah. And it's a poor approximation for what we actually need. Right. Yeah. Well, and in the past, right, like in the kind of foraging days I mean, again, like the sugary, fatty foods were treats. You needed them, right? Like you looked for them. You had to find them. And the rest of the time you're eating fibrous greens and And so I find it like really interesting. And again, like we're not evolved. The Scott Galloway quote that I always use is that Paleolithic brains, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. Yeah. And our brains aren't caught up at all. And so now we've got this technology that like we're just not capable of wielding it effectively. Yeah. And I think I'm generally someone that's like I'm sort of always skeptical sometimes of like top-down approaches because I come from this sort of Wendell school of thought that locality of knowledge breeds better solutions, right? Like when you understand the location and the specific place that you're in, then the solutions for that are going to be tailored to that. Yeah. Right. So that's my baseline. And yet, like, I don't think that applies in this situation, but I'm not sure what the answer is, and I don't know how you regulate or control for these things or what that looks like.
Well, and but like that's where, technology is now more pervasive than any other system, and that's because of the internet.
Yeah.
And it's never going back in the box.
Yeah.
So now we have to grapple with, because like sure, and not in the Wendell Berry school of thought, but I'm also even just from the pick yourself up by your bootstraps kind of mentality, where it's like, if you don't want to be on your phone, put your phone down, and if you can't do that, like put it in another room. Like if you can't do that, then get a flip phone. And I'm like literally considering a flip phone. Because I'm like, I bet it would be better for me in a lot of ways. But I'm not going to do that right now.
Yeah. That was one of the things that was interesting to me coming out of the hurricane. I would have this, there was this one spot that I could go to that had 5G coverage, right? So I could get there, I could send messages out in the morning, coordinate stuff. And I would go, anytime I had to leave there, I had about a 2/10 of a mile, 3/10 of a mile or something away from that spot before my phone would go dead again.
Mm-hmm.
And every time that I went, there was this like profound, like isolation, detox, like brief respite that I would notice happening in myself, or not respite, but just like panic, right?
Yeah.
And then after acclimating to that for like 5 to 10 minutes, it was back to like, well, I just can't do it. I can't do anything. And then it would be this profound equanimity that would roll over me. In some way, the paradox of that whole experience, like I'd come back and I'd have all these messages. Oh my God, are you okay? Are you okay? And then I get like 3 minutes away from where I had a signal. And it's like, I'm better than I've been in years. Yeah.
Well, I think that's the count. I mean, really, just with the whole flourishing project, like the personal flourishing project, is at some level about impulse control in today's society. Because to eat healthy foods does not fulfill all of the dopamine centers in the brain the same way a salad and tofu does for me. It's not gonna. It's just not gonna work the same. I just lost my train of thought too.
That's fine.
But so impulse control, like same thing with the exercise. Like you learn to like it,
right?
But it's not actually that enjoyable. Like even when you have learned to get that, like that time between the activity and the reward.
The runway's longer.
Is longer, and you have to be able to manage that. And so, like I've encouraged people and myself. Like I sometimes do this energy audit, which is largely a proxy for like a happiness audit to some extent. And the interesting thing is, like your overall level of happiness is higher when you're doing all of these things that do not immediately bring you gratification. But it's a counterintuitive lesson, and I don't think most people learn it ever, potentially. And if you do learn it, you kind of have to keep relearning it, because you're always going to pick up, like there's always going to be that shiny object, the thing that pulls you for your immediate attention, and you have to reorient to what really matters.
Right.
And so, like, there's so much, like we talked about last week on the community side. Like, there is friction and being in a community. There are all of these things that can go wrong, and you have to be willing to endure all of that to get the benefits.
Exactly.
And now, like in the past, there was no opting out of society. There was no opting out of the quote real world. But now that hedonic cocoon is as close as your vape and your cell phone in your parents' basement. And that's different than it has been.
Yeah. I think you have started to do something kind of interesting where you're trying to host friends and people at least once a week at the house. And deal. What was driving that for you?
Well, two things. One, my wife just pointed out, like, we need to have friends. Two, I'd rather host at my house where I get to cook and have food I like. But no, like I've always I've always liked how Dr. Book invites people over from the team, and it's just people talk about it after, and you're like, man, that meant something. Right. Bring people together. Yeah. So for me, like I just genuinely enjoy it. Yeah. And then and I think like I've got to go out of my way, otherwise I'm stuck in like there's too much to do. Like I'm already late getting home. Like there's like it's a little bit of a burden, and everything else. But gosh, I was reading something. Oh, it was probably the Oliver Berkman,
Right.
and it really is like there's so much to this friction piece, like.
Yeah.
And when you talked about like risk in terms of like business and everything else, you know, what was initially going through my head was the obstacle is the way. Like,
Yeah.
I will be successful with this because I will continue to, you know, treat the obstacle as the way, knowing that a lot of people aren't willing to do that.
Yeah.
And so, like, I know that if you just keep working at something like we've talked about jujitsu, ashtanga, like you can actually get pretty good at it. Most people just don't have that impulse control to fumble through all of the learning until you achieve some level of mastery where it becomes enjoyable.
Yeah.
And that's what like I encourage. Like one of the things that I think is so important about participating in sports or having like a real interest young is I have said like I got a buddy who's the CEO of a furniture company, and I did all his math homework. And like I did so much like math homework for him in high school, so he didn't have to take college level classes.
Yeah.
And then he was the captain of the tennis team at Chapel Hill, and he shot up the ranks, like from being a salesperson to being a CEO in like 8 years. And like I think that part of that is like you just learned how to master something, and you learned the determination, and you learned that there's a process, and if I keep working it, I'm probably going to get better and better.
Yeah.
But now, like, you don't have to do that so much. Like, again, like, I mean, any hobby in the past had a lot of friction to get to that baseline level of mastery. Take guitar. Right? Yeah. Anything we do without phones, like, is hard to some extent.
And you have to feel foolish. You have to fumble. You have to suck at it.
Yeah.
And that's that can be a really distressing thing. It's a weird.
But we're removing friction everywhere. Right. And so, like, everything we want to be on demand, and that cycle makes sense. But then when you look, like, what's the purpose of anything in life?
Yeah.
You know, just to hurry up to the next thing. And so, yeah, this friction piece, I think, is super important.
Yeah.
But I don't know how you, like, our society is literally wired against it. Like, we are cruising towards, like, you know, very Orwellian circumstances.
Yeah. The friction piece is interesting too. I'm thinking about this in terms of a slightly different bend on the diet, on the food stuff, like what we consume. I'm thinking in terms of it in diet, like diet culture.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I are both big fans of the guy Lane Norton. Mm-hmm. One of the things I love about him is a researcher, and he's an all natural power lifter and all this sort of stuff. But one of the things I love about the guy is he like hammers home how much junk science there is out there. Mm-hmm. And it's the most boring answer, but it's like, it's calories in, calories out. You're not going to hijack that system no matter what any package or something someone's trying to sell you. But essentially the hook and the giant red flag on any diet is like, are they telling you there's something frictionless? Mm-hmm. And it's usually going to be like, if you do intermittent fasting, you're going to change your gut biome, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, no. And it's just a proxy for calories in, calories out. Right. Or they're going to try to sell you this special diet if you just eat this, if you just do this. But the idea, ultimately, I think it all creates more friction in your life. And, and it's the same thing with like porn or like gambling or whatever. Like there's some frictionless entry point into a feeling state that you're trying to acquire that ultimately will create more friction in your life. Yeah. You can get there. You can get to the same brain tingles with a lot less effort, but the problem is it's going to create a lot more friction in the back end. And so I think like these diets, and it's like, cool, you can do keto if you want, but you really only need a piece of fucking bread.
Yeah, okay. I think I just came to terms with like gambling and and like sex, pornography, addiction. All right. I just don't get it, and I still don't get it. But here's what I get. Okay. Like I just think those aren't as good as using drugs. Yeah. In that analogy, it's like, well, you got to learn to go to the gym, because if you don't go to the gym, then your knees hurt and this hurts and your body breaks down. But like, you can shortcut everything with like, cocaine and heroin. Yeah. So I get that. The rewards from sex and scrolling TikTok, Instagram, gambling. Yeah. Like, it seems like just go shoot depth. Like,
Yeah.
So like, I'm just like, this is an intermediate step. Like, let me just skip to the pure pleasure piece.
Yeah. I don't
You
need.
don't need to.
Yeah, I don't need pizza light. I don't need like low calorie
No,
pizza. Like,
just
yeah.
blooming onions.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well,
Yeah.
we'll have to pick this topic back up, but I gotta run.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
Cool.